Good evening and welcome to Flat Earth and Other Hot Sausages with me, Nathan Oakley, Paula Toms, and Mark Sargent. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing well, and it's not the best title ever in the world for this show,
You
but
gave
I'll
me a
take it.
chuckle.
Sure.
I was going to call it Flat Earth Clues Live, but then every single interview you do is called Flat Earth Clues, so it's kind of
Yeah, it's true. Good point.
yeah. I mean, the main reason you're here, Mark, is to shall I just use the word straight away? Well, I'm hoping you'll convert my wife into seeing reality. That's the main point. So I'm hoping, in a
Is
nutshell, we'll go through
is
some
is
of the
Paula?
clues.
Are you easily hypnotizable? Have you ever been hypnotized?
So I'd have been hypnotized, wouldn't
Yes,
I?
speak
I
up.
know.
Yes, speak up a bit.
All right, I will turn up the thing just so I can hear. No worries. I mean, I'll do what I can, but overall, my job isn't going to be necessarily to convince you as much as is to put the seed into your head. But we'll get into that. So, anyway, how do you want to lead in with this?
I don't know. You start with I don't know. Clue one. I when I first heard clue one, I thought it was a terrible clue to start with. Now, I actually agree with you. I think it's a really good clue to start with. So I mean,
Yeah. Okay, so let's do this. Yeah, because the introduction was kind of like, and forgive me because I'm kind of coming at this a little bit cold. Paula, have you seen any of my clues, or you kind of heard them in the background every once in a while? What people are talking about them?
No.
Never seen them. You've just been staying away from this for as long as you can, and now you're being drug into this, and now I'm supposed to interrogate you and get you to see the way, or it's kind of like the Inquisition, I think, or the Crusades, or something along those lines. Okay. What I did was when I made the clues. Let's do a preface real quick before we go into clue one. Was I treated this like a court case, really, when it boils down to it. Kind of like, I mean, Marty Leeds did a much better job of treating it as a court case than I did. But what I mean is, if your perception of how you see the world can be divided into, the duality of a courtroom, the who's for and who's against, right? There was science on one side of it, and science was always saying the same thing, which was, well, it's obvious. It's obvious a globe. Here's our point, here presenting their case to the court, and the defense. So the science would be the prosecution, and the defense would be everybody else. And the defense always rested. You'd always ask the defense for the last 500 years. The defense would be like, we've got nothing. Any counter arguments? No. Any of this? No. The defense just sat there silent. There was just nothing but crickets from the other side. And so when I started going into this, I started looking at the world officially from science's point of view, because it's like, wow, science just keeps crushing religion and everybody else on the other side of the courtroom on a regular basis. So science must have everything, they need. They've got all their ducks in a row, right? So it was the kind of like me looking behind the scenes on science's side, looking in science's briefcases in the courtroom, saying, okay, what do you got? Because obviously no one can stand up against you guys. And when I started looking in those briefcases, I realized it was nothing but empty pages. There's nothing there. And you're thinking, well, that can't be true. And I thought the same as you. I was like, it can't be possible. Everybody knows the world is a sphere. Everybody knows this. And I'll start, this is me doing my presentation to the jury, but before I get into my arguments, which is to you, Paula. I will give you a quote that I put in every description now and every video I ever do from, you've heard of, the book 1984, obviously, by George Orwell. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So George Orwell, famous author, he wrote a quote. He did an article back in 1946 for the Tribune. And I think it was over in England, as a matter of fact. And he said it was an interesting thing where he was going against science and saying how science always gets the benefit of the doubt no matter what. I mean, they get huge amounts of leeway. And he said, it's weird. He goes, you could go up to anybody on the street. And keep in mind, George Orwell was never a flat earther. But he goes, you could go up to anybody on the street and say, how do you know the earth is a sphere? And the first reaction, everybody, I mean, even now, right? The first reaction is, well, It's obvious it's a sphere. What are you, dumb? We all know it's a sphere. And if you tried to press it on them, it's like, well, how do you know? They get angry, which is weird. It's a weird reaction. Now, the reason why I thought that quote from George Orwell was interesting was that this was 1946. NASA wasn't even founded until 1958. There was no space program from anybody, unless you want to count the Germans, but that's a whole nother story for another time. So how did everybody know the Earth was a sphere in 1946? NASA wasn't up there. There were no pictures taken. The only thing we had were models. And that's my opening argument. And we'll get into the other stuff in a bit, but I think George Orwell was onto something. Now, it's not where I started, my journey, but that's when I circled back to him. That's what really stuck out, because it's something we are told. Everything else in your life, you can test. Fire burns, water is wet. You drop something, it falls to the floor. Something is doing that, right? But we can all test these things at home. When it comes to how the Earth looks, it's something you're told, and not just told. You're told by, especially where you guys are, you're told by the Americans. You're told by the American government how exactly the world looks. So let's say, and again, we'll get into the clue one here in like 2 seconds. I'll end with this, my intro with this. Let's say science got it wrong for some reason. Are you interpreting? Let's say science got it wrong. Would they fess up to it? Because science has built a massive institution. Would they tell you if they got it wrong? They have a hard time telling us that anything they get is wrong. But with something like this, it's so big that if they got it wrong, I firmly believe that they would bury it as deeply as they could. So anyway, that's the end of my intro. Into clue one. Clue one, which Rob Skiba, I think even to this day, will say, oh, it's your weakest clue. You should have never opened with it. I was like, oh no, man, because presenting stuff to the court of the world, as it were, the jury being is like how the world is shaped. It's not proving flat Earth as much as it is proving reasonable doubt in the globe. And that's what I wanted to open with was, especially over here in the United States, we make way more movies than the rest of the world combined. We make a lot of crap. But the point is, we do it because of greed, and there's a lot of money to be made in movies. And when I was looking at this, I was first looking at things that we had versus things that aren't there, that people assume that are there. And that comes down to space movies. And you're thinking, well, there's tons of space movies. Yeah, there are. There's a lot of space movies that are made out there. There's Star Trek alone has the one that was released this year was the 14th Star Trek movie, not to mention all the series. Star Wars, we're rebooting Star Wars. There's, so many Star Wars coming out. Battlestar Galactica. Take your pick. There's a lot of science fiction movies out there. And then I was going, okay, that's great. What about movies that are sort of scientific, like set in the future, but supposed to be realistic, like The Martian, Interstellar, Mission to Mars, Red Planet, even movies like Event Horizon, stuff like that. There's some of them, but there's not as nearly as many as the science fiction movies. And then I got down to, well, what about movies about actual space? Because, it's the greatest achievement in humankind, right? We went to the moon. There should be some moon movies out there. There aren't any. And I challenge anybody. I'm a media nut. I looked through every media avenue I could, and there's only been 2 movies that even scratched the surface. And that's where clue 1 came from, which was The Right Stuff. And I'm old enough to remember there was a movie called The Right Stuff in 1983. And it was, big production, top name, actors, 3 hours long. And it was all really just cover the astronaut training program of the Americans. And it ended with the first rocket being launched into low Earth orbit. Never made a sequel. Lost Best Picture only to Gandhi. Made a ton of money. Won Academy Awards for other things. They never made a sequel to it. And there was no other space program movie from 1983 all the way up until 1995. And 1995 was the last time, and that was 21 years ago now, they ever made one. It was called Apollo 13. And that one was, the Apollo 8 through Apollo 17 supposedly did, either deep Earth orbit or moon missions, and Apollo 13 had problems. Can I, is it okay if I keep going? I'm doing fine, right?
What I was saying was that the Ben Affleck one, and I was like, no, that's Armageddon.
No, that was Armageddon. No, that's perfect though, because again, we'll circle back to that, which is there after Apollo 13 with again, top-notch cast, won Academy Awards. There were no moon movies. There's never been a movie about the Americans going to the moon ever. And you're thinking, well, that doesn't really prove anything. It's like, well, no, it doesn't. But at the same time, you've got to understand that it breaks protocol for what the Americans do in film, in cinema. We make movies. If there's a nickel to be made, we're going to make a movie about it. There's movies made about everything, straight to DVD movies. There's never even been a straight to DVD moon movie made. That's all. The rest of it has all been science fiction movies to fill in the gaps. 2001: A Space Odyssey, Apollo 18. There was only 17. Moon with Sam Rockwell. Armageddon, which you were talking about. A Deep Impact, also sort of a pseudo space movie. All those movies are there to subliminally put into your head. Though, yeah, because you could ask the average person on the street, "Oh yeah, you remember those the American space program movies?" And people go, "Oh yeah, sure." And I'm going, "Really? Name one." And then they start, going through and they realize that most of the movies in your head are science fiction. To date, never been a moon movie. Ever, ever, ever. In fact, the movie literally called Moon with Sam Rockwell from several years ago. Why was that why was that title never trademarked? Ever, 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 until, the mid 2000s. It was just amazing to me. Okay, so that was
a quick status check then. So did you actually know that? Did you know that there was no, man's greatest achievement, no movies made? Did you know that?
When I first started this?
No, I'm asking Paula.
oh, sorry, Paula. sorry. Did you know this, Paula? Do you watch a lot? But Paula, do you watch a lot of movies?
I do, yeah, but I'm not really into space movies.
That's all right. That's all right. That's right. It's just one of those. It's one of those suspicious type things that I throw at people. I say, "Look, did you know this?" And people say, "Okay, fine," but this still doesn't prove. It doesn't mean the Earth is flat. And I go, "No, it doesn't." But it does show you that there's something out there. It's the first level of suspicion, the first level of reasonable doubt. It's like, okay, it's for me, it is a level of cover. It's just one layer that they are hiding. They're going to extreme lengths to hide something. And I was looking at this and going, well, why would they hide? Why would they not do any moon movies? And you're saying, why would they care, right? Because if you let a Hollywood studio or a mainstream studio do a moon movie, you are allowing them to try to reproduce film techniques that they may have already done. Basically, if you watch it, which is why I included that clip for a bunch of videos, that movie or that video from Rammstein, the German band, We're All Living in America. And they went to a warehouse and literally replicated the exact feel of the Apollo missions in their video. And it was brilliant. And they, didn't break the bank to do it. And because they were not shy about it behind the scenes. They do not believe the Americans went to the moon. And that's where this thing starts, which is, do you trust the Americans? I'm asking you guys because you're out of the country, and no offense to the Americans watching this, but do you trust the American government or the American military in this case to tell you the truth? Kind of, a big leap of faith.
Do you trust them?
I don't really know.
You don't really know?
I don't know.
That's all right. That's right. Again, it's just a first step. But you got to remember, the Americans lie about a lot of stuff. If we can lie, we're gonna lie. We've lied about just pretty much every war we've ever done. Anyone that's ever died of any high importance, we're gonna lie about it. History. Napoleon said it best. Everyone knows that history is written by the winners, but Napoleon's quote, I think, is better. And that is, he said that history is just lies that are agreed upon, from a group of people. It's like, okay, how are we going to spin this story? Because the public really doesn't need to know the truth. And I think that applies to the very big things as well. So there you go. That's clue one.
Cool.
All right.
Any comments, Paula?
No.
Questions, doubts? What do you got? Anything you want to throw at me?
That's positive. She says a good point.
What?
So far, so good.
All right. You want me to just kind of rattle through them? I don't think we can do them all, but I'll hit the main ones. The bird wall was an interesting one. And I encourage, and for this, this for a lot of people was a turning point. It got them in. Once you got to, if you could get to clue 2, which was the bird wall, generally you'd finish the series. The people that I saw, I didn't run into a lot of people that said, "Oh yeah, I got to number 7 and then I quit," or "I got to number 8 and then I quit." You generally by the time they got 2, they made it all the way through. 2 was something that I looked at, which was very interesting. Also on the American side, American military admiral, youngest admiral in the history of the American Navy, named Richard E. Byrd. And what he was known for, his claim to fame was the hollow earth theory. People that think that if the earth is a sphere, like this microphone kind of, that it's completely hollow, and that there are civilizations potentially that could live inside it. It's an old science fiction tale. Everybody knows about it. And Richard Byrd was kind of tied to this because when he was a young pilot, he supposedly flew to the North Pole. Supposedly there was an entrance there, and then he flew inside it or saw inside it and turned into this journey to the center of the earth type thing. And it was an entire new civilization that, or an old civilization that lived inside our spherical world. I thought, okay, it's very, very interesting. But what kept pointing me away was he did that in 1928. The rest of his life, or 1926, the rest of his life, all the way up till his dying day, he spent in Antarctica looking for something. He flying his own military planes, fully funded by the American military and whoever else was funding him, and he was looking for something from 1928 all the way up until his last mission, which was in 1956. And we know this because in 1954, we know, if you get a chance, the best clip, and we were lucky to get it on YouTube, is that the Richard Byrd interview on the Longines Chronoscope, an American kind of like a 60 minutes news show. I don't know what you call it, a weekly news show. And he goes on there, and this is 1954, and he says that Antarctica is the most important continent that's ever going to be in the future. There's an entire mountain range made out of coal that can supply the whole world. There's oil, there's uranium, there's minerals. There might even be territory disputes down there in Antarctica. All the major powers are down there after World War II. Russia, UK, Argentina, New Zealand, Chile, Australia, they're all down there. And he's saying, oh yeah, this is going to be they're saying we're going to be down there forever. And all of a sudden they go down for his next mission, which was Operation Deep Freeze in 1955, 1956. And something happens. He finds something. And whatever it was so big and so important that all the countries left the ice at the same time. All of them, even the ones that needed the resources, like UK was rebuilding from World War II. Russia was, the Soviet Union was rebuilding from World War II. All these countries left the ice at the same time and put a treaty in place, which is now known as the Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959. Every country that becomes an economic power has to sign it. And it means that no company, no matter how powerful, how influential they are, no company can go down to Antarctica and set up shop ever for anything.
Just for the viewers at home and for Paula, how many members are there now of the Antarctic Treaty? Do you know?
All of them. Every country that's an economic power is, if all of a sudden a new country, you start a new country. No, Paula started a new country. Paula, you create a new country. We'll call it Paulantonia. And all of a sudden you become an economic power. You are given this piece of paper and you're saying you have to sign it. And you say, what is it? It says none of your corporations can go down to Antarctica ever. And you say, well, how, what do you mean forever? It's like, well, forever. This treaty is the longest running treaty of all time. It's not even up for debate until 2041. And it seals off Antarctica. It doesn't make any sense. This continent is supposedly, if you believe in the globe model, is as big as Australia, although Google Earth will say it's slightly different. And no, there's no indigenous plant life, no animal life, no old ruins or any kind. It's just snow and ice. It's a very, very unique continent, and no one's ever allowed to go down there. it was remarkable. That is one of those things when I was looking at this, again, trying to create reasonable doubt in the globe. If something was wrong with the globe model and you wanted to hide this, that you would have one of the first things you would do is you would hide the borders. You would seal them off so that nobody, or you would limit it without putting up signs that said go away. You would limit it to where very, very few people could go there. And to date, only the people that are down there, yeah, the American military's got a little bit of a presence, of course, and the Russians, but it's mostly scientists, but no corporation can go down there.
Sorry to interrupt. You've
Yep.
said something that Paula might not follow. I'll ask you, Paula. Sorry, I'm going to continue looking at the camera.
No, it's okay.
So, Paula, did you when Mark says about the borders, do you know what he's referencing about closing off the borders? Do you know what he means? Maybe if you can turn around, Mark, and point at what you mean.
So if the world that you know is not a ball but a dinner plate, that means it has edges. That means that the edge of that dinner plate has an edge, and there's also an upper edge, which, by the way, is very, very convenient because in the same year that the Antarctic Treaty was signed, 1959, was also the same year that the Van Allen radiation belt was announced. I say announced by NASA. NASA was formed in 1958, and then one of their scientists, Van Allen, in 1959, announces the Van Allen radiation belts, which is supposedly this band of deadly radiation that circles the globe that nobody ever can ever go through. These two things happen not the exact same time, but in the same year. The coincidence of these two things happening, going from looking at this model behind me, there is no coincidence. Is it a leap of faith? Of course it is, but it is what I would do. I was trying to put myself, remember, I was trying to go from science's point of view. If I was heavy into science, if I was a leading scientist and I figured this out, one of the first things you do is like, yeah, nobody can ever, we can't let people get too close to finding this out. Well, how do you do that? You can't let them get to, the boundaries of this place, whether they're up. The up is easy because nobody's got spaceships, which is a whole other thing for another time. But the outer edge, you can go down there. And I'm not saying, if you had $15,000, you could go to Antarctica tomorrow. You could book a trip and go there. But you're only going to go to the outer peninsulas, the outer islands. You're going to get pictures with penguins. If you want to go to the South Pole, they'll take you to a marker and they'll say this is the South Pole. But you will not be allowed to just, can I get a snowmobile and a helicopter, just go in that direction? No. You will not be able to. If you are, you will be watched. And to date, it's worked very, very well, on top of which it's a very unpleasant climate. And nobody ever wants to go there because not only is it very cold, but it's also very high. Most of the continent is around 14,000 feet or so, which is, most people get altitude sickness between 7,000 and 10,000 feet. Anyway, so
quick check then, Paula. So you with us so far?
Yeah, okay.
All right. The third thing I looked at was, again, I'm got to remember nobody, and I'll say this in the thing that I'm going to do tonight, which is I say almost nobody in the community starts out thinking flat Earth is the greatest thing ever. We all think it's a horrible idea. Like you, it's like, no, I don't buy it. I didn't buy it either. Nobody did. You didn't. He didn't. People listening, they didn't. It's like everyone looks at it and goes, this is stupid. This is ridiculous. There's no way it could be real. And I said, but the more adventurous say, well, okay, well, if flat Earth is so stupid, I should be able to, point all just punch holes in it and then be done with it and go to sleep and never have to think about it again. And then slowly but surely, everybody does the absolutely the wrong thing. They start looking at it, and the more they look at it, the more questions. Everything you think you can solve raises 3 more questions, like the one that's going to come up, which is the maps. I'm looking through the, because the flat Earth, the generally accepted model. I know other people are working on variations of a different scale and perspective. I know, but this is the one I'm going to go with until somebody actually announces they've got one better. Which is, I started looking at the maps. I started looking at this flat Earth map, and I noticed it was very similar to a map that was in the Wikipedia list of map projections. If you go down the list of Wikipedia map projections, there's a whole bunch of projections, all different ways of looking at the world. If you took the globe and put it into different shapes and, get different perspectives. but there was only one that was tied to things. You know, it had little annotations next to it, and not just one, but several, and they were all very, very interesting. One was a projection called the azimuthal equidistant map, and that is this, where the North Pole's at the center, Antarctica is on the entire outer edge, and the continents kind of are spread naturally from the center point. Kind of like if you took a globe, put your hand on the North Pole and flattened it, and then kind of, trim the edges a bit, that's what it would look like. And I was going, oh, that's kind of cool. It looked just like the flat Earth map, but it wasn't listed as the flat Earth map. It was listed as other things. One, it was used in the official United States Geological Survey, the big map makers of the world, as their leading projection. Well, not their leading projection, but it was in there. It was in their catalog. It was also created by this model was created 1,000 years ago by a Persian scientist named al-Biruni, Persia, which is now Iran, I believe. And I thought that was interesting because NASA actually acknowledges al-Biruni as a serious scientist, and they've even got a moon crater on the moon named after him. It's called the al-Biruni crater. And I thought that was really interesting. But the third thing that was even more interesting was that projection back there is pretty much identical to the UN flag, which was created in 1946. I'm going, wait. So the UN flag, the USGS and NASA all recognize, this map in one degree or another. But at the same time, it is not linked to the flat Earth map. So if you go to the flat Earth map in Wikipedia, they'll show you their map, but it is not cross-referenced with the azimuthal equidistant map in any way, shape, or form. So this map is absolutely sane and acknowledged by major groups, major science groups around the world. No play on words there. But if you say that it's literal, then you're crazy, which is a little odd. I was going, that's really, really strange because you've got something, you've got a projection, and the UN flag is also very, very interesting, which I mentioned. Matt, I'll give credit where credit is due, which was when you look at the UN flag, which is this, there's something missing that is on this map that is not on the UN flag, and that is Antarctica. Antarctica is not on the UN flag. And it should be there. It's like, yeah, fine, nobody owns Antarctica, which is a whole nother thing, which I listed. I said, I thought, I started making connections, which was, okay, Antarctica isn't on the UN flag, but it's as big as Australia. But wait a minute, who owns Antarctica? Nobody owns Antarctica. Literally, it is real estate. It's the only real estate in the world that is owned by no one. No one lays claim to it. No one, unilaterally, what you're saying, that nobody's gotten in a fight over this? China, Russia, no country has made claim. You never even hear disputes about it. And let me really go back to the corporate thing I was talking about. Let's say your country wants, you have an oil company in your country. You have a lot of money. There's oil down there. Not only can your oil company not go to Antarctica, you can't even talk about it. You'd think you'd go like the New York Times, the Washington Post, or one of the major newspapers in your country and say, I want to run a story saying how would it be great to have the Paula Oil Company go to Antarctica. You can't even run those stories. Why not? Why can't you even talk about it? You can't go to a politician, throw down a briefcase of money and say, I need to get into Antarctica. What's it going to take? There's companies out there that could start fracking in your backyard today if they wanted to. It's not hard. It's happening over here in the States. I know it's probably not happening in England as much, but over here in the West, there's fracking everywhere. All they do is they pull up to your house, they give you a briefcase of money, they say, we want to set up a natural gas well in your backyard. And people go, absolutely. People will take bribes. No, there isn't a bribe big enough that can get you
to ask a question. So go on.
What?
Go on.
What? Ask. It's okay. Seriously, I've heard them all.
Why not?
Why not? What?
Why can't they? Why is no one laying claim to it?
Because it is a secret forbidden zone. Nobody can go in there, because if you allow corporations to get there, you have the chance for an accident. Meaning, this is a problem. This is a piece of land that is tied to something so important, so secret, that it's bigger than money. And up until now, all the other conspiracies are tied to money in some way. This conspiracy is bigger than money. And that means if your oil company, if the Paula Oil Company goes down to Antarctica, you're going to set up shop. You're going to set up rigs. You're going to have trucks. You're going to have helicopters. You're going to have planes. We can't, I'm going to talk from the government's point of view. We can't, the Antarctic guys cannot take a chance that one of your helicopters or planes goes off course, because if it does, it's going to be a hassle. You know, it goes off course and sees something that it shouldn't. Sorry, but that plane has to go down. You know, that helicopter has to go down. And you multiply that by number of companies that and corporations could be there. They just said, you know what? It's better. Let's just, it's all or nothing. We either let them all in or we let none of them in. They decided it's going to be way easier to let, you know, despite the money, despite the revenue that will be lost and the resources that will be lost, we're just not going to let anybody in, just to keep it simple. And that's what they did. And every country they told this to, at the highest levels anyway, agreed. It's like, yeah, nah, you know, it's true. I can totally see where we're going with this. A single helicopter strays off course. What would happen is too many accidents would happen, you know, accidents. Why are there so many accidents? And then there'd be inquiries. This sort of discussion it's always going to end the same way. So you just cannot let corporations go down there. You can't. I agree with them. I mean, you know, in this case, I try to empathize with the other side, and I absolutely agree. It's like, look, if you're trying to keep Antarctica a secret, you can't let people down there, you know, other than the occasional tourist that wants to take a picture with penguins. That's easy. You know, they're on the beach. You can monitor those guys. Corporations, that gets messy in a hurry, especially nowadays with corporate jets. You know, the single corporate jet, you know, your Paula Oil Company that's down there, let's say you want to go down there and visit, you know, you take your Learjet. That Learjet goes off course. Wouldn't take them that long, I think, to you know, to run into something that would compromise the whole situation. So there you go.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Which one should I go? I don't want to hit all, because some of it's kind of ethereal. I'm trying to plead this as a court case to her. So other things to look at, for example, let's look at. I'll skip past the whole Shell Beach thing for a second. Well, let's do like status quo. Goes into something like this. The question that would eventually come up is that, because I get this question every week, is why? Why would science bother hiding this? Question?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, why? I get this question every week, and that is, why would science bother hiding? In fact, some of the real debunkers say, why? Why would you hide something like this? If the Earth wasn't actually a globe, why would you hide it? Well, what's the point?
Yeah,
what's the most
specific version of pretty much that? Go ahead.
Okay, the motivation.
Hold on a sec, Matt. She's gonna ask you something.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like years ago they thought the Earth was flat.
Yes.
And then they decided it was round.
Globe. Yeah.
So why? Why? I don't get it.
Because that's an excellent question. That's a great, you know what, we'll preface, yeah, we'll do that question first, because that's the other one I get, which is, look, if it was flat, then why did everybody all of a sudden switch to it? And that is because eventually, and I don't know necessarily what your religious beliefs are, eventually you have to, whoever built this place, and I don't, you know, be it an advanced civilization or divine power, whoever built this place had to eventually create the illusion that there was no edge. And that was easy enough to do. You know, you know, really in that is modern science is born, because from that science could build its temple, which is, you tell everyone it. Let me lead into this. Every other species on this planet, using this word loosely, because I know you still believe in it right now. Every other species on this planet will adapt and not care if it finds a barrier. So, like, you know what a wildlife preserve is, you know, where you can put, you know, buffalo and whatever endangered species. You can make a wildlife preserve, and if it's big enough, the animal population on the inside of it won't care. It's like, you know, they may walk up to a fence, but, you know, there's 2,000 acres behind them. They could care less. It's like, it's good to eat, you know, enough stuff to drink, good places to lie down. Great. Human beings are the exact opposite. it wouldn't matter how big the preserve is, whether it be 1,000 acres or 1,000 square miles. Human beings do not like being enclosed. They do not like being in any sort of container or cage, which is why jails and the threat of jails and incarceration works so well. If all of a sudden, which is why, if you do remember the Truman Show, and again, if you don't, that's okay. The whole Truman Show concept with the 1998 movie, which was they put a guy in a giant simulated planetarium / terrarium, basically a simulated city, big Hollywood soundstage. But once he found out he was in that stage, he was gone. In fact, the entire movie was him trying to figure it out and trying to get out. And once he got to the edge, once he found the edge, he left. Human beings would be the same way. And I beat it to death in that one clue where I said, look, that's all they care about. Who made where'd the edge, where's this fence from? Who made the fence? Why are we inside the fence? What's our purpose? Blah, blah, blah. That's all they would care about. And it would consume their lives. No one would act naturally. So what was her question again? It was the
well, you pretty much answer it. What you're saying is that the globe has been created. Why go?
Oh yeah. The globe has been created and it had to be created early enough. The illusion had to be created early enough before we got technology that could exploit it. The other thing, which was I'd mentioned in a couple things, which was, let's say your country. Oh, she's coming back. Okay. Oh, sorry. So let's say your country had old maps from the previous civilizations, and you saw the world, the UN flag map, and you saw the edge of it. Let's say you saw this 500, 600 years ago. Who cares? What are you going to do with it? You're not going to do anything. You've got wooden ships and horses. So if you were king of your country 500 years ago, there was no way, even if you knew the world was flat, there's no way you could exploit it. But once technology started creeping up, and really the invention of the internal combustion engine, once that happened, well, then all bets were off, because then you've got gasoline powered ships and cars and planes and all sorts of vehicles that can cover vast distances very, very quickly. So before that happens, you've got to put the globe in place, because then nobody even bothers looking. So as soon as the internal combustion engine comes out, it's like, who cares? It's a ball. All we're going to do is go round and round and round and round. There is no fence. So you're never ever going to look.
It's the same as with the Antarctic reason. Then it's to hide the edge.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The Antarctic is a wonderful, great piece of negative reinforcement. There's a lot of natural reinforcement there. If you go down to Antarctica, if you were, even 100 years ago, you run into a lot of nasty stuff on the way down there. It gets colder and colder. There's ocean. There's no land bridge to Antarctica from anywhere. The closest thing is South America. And it gets colder until you get icebergs. When you get to Antarctica, it's a 200-foot straight up wall of ice. When you get on top of that, there's nothing to eat. There's no animals or anything, unless you want to try to track down some penguins. And then it slopes up to I don't know what 2 miles is, 2 kilometers, we'll say in your case, 2 kilometers high, plateaus out. It just screams go away. Just the natural landscape of Antarctica. So anyway, back to the original thing, which was, so why do it? Why create the globe 500 years ago? Because you want to hide the fence. But then when modern civilization, when we figured out that it wasn't, when you actually found out absolutely positively, when you send your rockets up there, you have to hide it. If you're mainstream science or mainstream civilization, because there's too much risk of chaos until you can control it. So let's say tomorrow, somebody figures out and releases, some independent country goes through the UN and they release, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, the Earth isn't a globe. Think of the shock waves that would happen. It'd be threefold. The first, obviously, would be academics. Every university in every country in the world would be turned upside down almost immediately. Astrophysics and astronomy, those departments are gone immediately. I mean, they shut their doors. They never reopen. And then the remaining sciences, geology, hydrology, archaeology. The what?
So how did they all know way back then?
How does it get introduced 500 years ago?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the big mystery, isn't it? I mean, do you credit it to the the handful of men that made that massive leap, which is a whole nother thing, which is how do you make this massive leap from a very simple and efficient flat, circular world, dinner plate type world with a dome enclosure with a firmament, the religions embraced and scholars of the day embraced. How do you make the leap from that to a spinning ball that's spinning around at 1,000 miles an hour and orbiting the sun at 60,000 miles an hour, and that solar system is going through space, and that galaxy is going through space? How do you make that massive leap? I think it was artificially introduced. I don't think that Copernicus, by any stretch, he didn't even release it, until he was dead. That paper, he made sure it's like, do not give this publication out until I am long gone. That's how worried he was about it. But I think it had help. I think that the men involved had help from, wherever, you want to call it divine inspiration, wherever, but they didn't do it alone because it had to be done. Really.
Do you want to just, the wife's asking me, she's saying, who? Do you want to just name some of the characters involved? And
well, the big one would be Copernicus. If he was the guy that came up with the model. And
ask away.
Sorry, go ahead.
What did he do?
He was the one that basically came up with the equations and theory that changed it from geocentric, which means the Earth is the center of the universe, the center of everything, to a heliocentric model, which says that Earth is just this tiny speck of dust in the middle of a vast, almost indescribable distance of nothingness.
How did he know that?
Well, that's just it. We don't know exactly where did he get his inspiration from? I have no idea. Where did anybody come up with their stuff? But he wasn't confident enough in it, in that theory, to release it until after he died. He published it years before, and I was amazed. And again, the church had to go along with it too, which was also strange, because you would have thought that the major religions would have pushed back harder, but they realized that science was getting a foothold because we were inventing stuff. The sad part about all your major religions is that when you go up against science, every time science invents something, it reinforces science and kind of diminishes religion. How do you explain microwave ovens to somebody 150 years ago? We have stuff now that you could, that would get you burned in Salem, if you took it back in time, and we just use it as just, nothing. We don't think anything of it.
Was that like invention drop, deliberate or not?
The what?
You said microwave oven. I don't know if you could have picked Velcro or, another NASA invention.
Oh, what? Wait, I'm sorry. Microwave oven was a what?
NASA invention.
Oh, well, yeah, I didn't even think of that. You're absolutely right. But no, I mean, I like
if you dropped it in deliberately because it was a NASA invention.
No, I didn't even, but microwave is a pretty good one. But I mean, I was thinking of that every time I see a jet airplane fly across the sky. I go, 150 years ago, how do you describe that? How do you describe the physics of lift and drag and propulsion systems to someone from even 150 years ago? So every time we invent one of these things, science gets a boost. That adds to the temple or the church of science, whereas religion just has to stick with their same old song and dance that they've been using for a long, long time. So when religion kind of bent the knee to the globe thing, it wasn't a big deal because they were concentrating more on the religious icons of the day. Whatever religion you're talking about, they're focusing on the deity rather than, well, who cares about the shape of the world, right? We'll deal with that. The church will still be in place. Anyway, so if tomorrow all of a sudden the world would, they announced that the world was, not a globe, academia would be turned on its head. Economics would be in major upheaval because there would be entire industries that would fall and rise at the same time. But the biggest thing, of course, would be, and I don't, again, not trying to do the whole kumbaya thing, but would be the spirituality side of it, which is, if this place is not a globe and we're not this tiny speck in space, but we are, this very significant creative force on a dinner plate world that's enclosed, that means there's a creator. And if there's a creator, well, aren't we all accountable for everything? And that changes everything.
Why does that mean that there's a creator?
Well, if there's it, churches even now will say that, oh yeah, God, whatever you want to name God, God created planets and solar systems and galaxies. But if this world has an edge and it has a definite shape to it, well, it means it was built. It has structure to it. A globe, from science's standpoint, a globe is very organic, and a globe can just happen. Remember, the Big Bang, supposedly the globe happened out of nothing. But if you're talking about a dinner plate type thing with a cake cover on it, you're talking about physical structure, an upper edge and an outer edge. And if it's got structure, I mean, somebody built it. And I'm not saying, does that guarantee that that's proof of design, divine influence, of intelligent design, a handprint of God? No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying it's way closer to it than science wants to admit. And with that, there comes a lot of questions. For example, and I use the UFO analogy, which is the American Air Force knows full well there's lots of funny things flying up in the sky. You can go out with night vision anytime you want. I recommend people do it. You can look up with night vision. I've seen them all the time. The sky is crawling with things. But the United States Air Force will never, ever admit to it for one simple reason, and that is they're better than us. You can't control the skies if you don't control the skies. You can't be the ultimate power if you're not the ultimate power. If you're a government or a secret society above a government, it's tough for you to have the top-notch credibility if you're sitting inside somebody's house that they didn't build.
I'm hoping you'll labour this point a bit, because both Paula and I have sat in an area of Britain, Shropshire, and it's the lowest light pollution in the whole country. And as a consequence of that, you can sit in the very nice hot tub that my folks used to have up there and let your eyes adjust. And you're right, with the naked eye, you can see all sorts of stuff going on.
Oh, yeah.
Paula has seen that for herself, which is nice.
The sky is crawling with stuff, and the Americans would love to take credit for it. In fact, we love giving a wink here and there and saying, oh yeah, that's just our stuff, that's our secret stuff, that's Area 51, we've created all the UFOs. That's a bunch of crap. The Americans would love to take credit for it, but UFOs, and you guys, everyone knows the stories. UFOs have been around for as long as we've been here, and probably much, much longer. If you have any doubt, and I'm not talking about only going back 100 years and looking at the Aurora, Texas thing. I'm talking about going back to 1561 Germany, the Nuremberg event of 1561. Look that up. It's in Wiki. It's not a secret. That was 200 something years before the United States was even founded as a country. So unless the United States has also mastered time travel, no, the United States controls nothing up there. But you can't admit to it because you don't want to undermine your authority, and that's the big thing of why you got to keep this thing a secret for as long as you can until you can control it. Because once it gets out, there's a fundamental shift in people's thoughts. For example, if you knew there was actually, I'm not talking about an overweight guy in a bathrobe and a beard, that type of God. I'm talking about, just if there's somebody been looking over your shoulder your entire time while you've been living your life, would you do anything horrible? Would you go to war? Would you commit a hate crime? Would you rob a bank? Would you do anything, that you knew deliberately? It's the whole angel devil on your shoulder thing. Once you're accountable, and you can feel it. When you do something wrong, but most of us, we still do wrong things every once in a while because we know we can get away with it. Well, this adds a whole nother level to it. It's like, well, what if there is a scorecard? You still gonna do it? You're still gonna do these bad things? That changes. I mean, do mothers send their sons off to war? No. Do you commit a hate crime anymore? No. How about racism, sexism? All these little things. No, I shouldn't say little. I'm comparing them to war. People come back. So why did you call sexism? it is a fundamental shift in how we treat each other. And the authority, you combine that with everything else I just mentioned, on top of there'd be entire cities that would move out to the ice. People, entire congregations of people from religious houses. You got to remember that 80% of the world still belongs to one of the 5 major religions, which is Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity. You'd have entire congregations that would sell their assets and move out to the ice and form a city there just because they could be closer to the edge or wherever the barrier was. The government would have massive questions. But here's the biggest, and I'll end this point on this, which is, because I don't know how long you want to go with this thing anyway, which is science would then be posed with some questions that they're not willing to answer, which is something like this. So you told us it was a globe for the last 500 years, and then you found out it was wrong and you covered it up. But the point was you were wrong. What else were you wrong about? What else are you hiding? The people's trust in mainstream science would plummet. Not only that, but there would be a huge backlash by the religious institutions. So you were wrong about the globe. What about that Big Bang theory you were talking about, and all the funding you've been using for a lot of experiments? How about that evolution thing? Carbon dating. You just go on and on and on. And then the flip side of this, and this is where it gets a little scary, which is why I kind of I'm not going to end this on a bad note, which is why I put this to the churches in one of my clues. I said, people will go back to the church and say, hey, you were right about a lot of things. What else are you right about? Ooh, then we're talking a whole nother level of Bible literalism. That could get interesting. So you combine all the...
This is a nice segue to sort of wrap up the last section, hopefully move on to the next, which is with walls and ceilings, you've got 2 different control mechanisms. The one you've mentioned, which is the Antarctic Treaty, which locks the outer edge. And then you've got another one, which is still in existence to this day. And we see about their antics all the time. And they are, of course,
NASA, and all the corresponding space agencies. Because people say, do you believe in the American moon program? And I say, not only do I not believe in the American moon program, I believe that NASA was founded specifically just to keep this basically under wraps. Play on words there. Whereas the NASA program and all other space organizations are there to reinforce the globe, and only that. And I won't go into this too much, but you've got to look, if you're going to try to defend the globe, you've got to look at, you can look at the Russian program and the Japanese program, and the European space program, and the Chinese, but you've got to look at the Americans first, because they were the ones that blueprinted this. And because you say, well, they've got all these things, they've got all this evidence, we see, live footage, from low altitude from the ISS, but there should be, then this is, remember when I said I try to look in the briefcases of the prosecution and say, okay, you've got these guys, they're overflowing with so many things. But when you go in there, you notice there's a lot of things that aren't there. And I'll rattle off a few to you just to get you thinking, which is, the first one would be, there are almost no pictures of the Earth from space. And I mean, even official pictures. There was only one picture taken. And you can look it up and everyone will recognize it. One picture taken of the Earth from space from 1972 all the way up until the summer of last year. Only after our community started asking for it. 43 years, one picture. I mean, not like 5 different versions of the picture. One picture in different resolutions, which was taken from Apollo 17, supposedly in 1972, which shows the bottom part of Africa and all of Antarctica. No coincidence there. Antarctica was the only continent shown, in its entirety. Why would you do that? Why not take a picture of North America? It's the American space program. There are up until the summer of last year, there were no movies of the Earth rotating on its axis from space. None at all. The closest they had was Galileo, the 1990 probe, and that was the one that Matt Boylan called out, where it rotated a full 24 hours and the weather didn't change in 24 hours in the entire world. The clouds didn't morph. It was just stitched together pictures from another thing. There are no movies of any vehicle, even today, leaving or entering Earth's orbit with unedited footage where the camera's left on. No rocket has ever sat there it would turn the camera on and left Earth orbit or come back. It never ever happened. Even the JAXA program, the Japanese program, which supposedly circled the Earth, circled the moon with HD cameras. Apparently those cameras weren't on when they left Earth and when they left the moon, or when they're coming back. It was all chopped up. There is even no footage.
An interesting one with the pictures of Earth from space, because I came across that long before becoming a flat earther, and you have a similar story to me in this regard. So with me, it wasn't a network, it was just a computer, sort of 2 or 3 computers before this one, and I was looking for pictures of Earth from space. Actually, my ambitions were a little higher. I was hoping to find a satellite feed that had 24-hour weather footage from space, that's pie in the sky, that you're never going to get that now.
No.
But back then I looked for a picture of the Earth from space and it was all garbage. So I ended up putting together my own little composite with the moon in the background. I've still got it as a desktop background. But you had a similar sort of thing happen with you. I can't remember if it linked directly into flat Earth.
It didn't, but it shows you how the conditioning works. I saw this. I mean, I didn't get into flat Earth until 2015, but back in 2000, when I was running a tech support team out of Boulder, Colorado, I was going to put up a picture of the Earth from space and did put up different ones on every monitor on the support team. And you go into Google back in 2000, you type in Earth from space, and literally it was just rows and rows and rows of the exact same picture. And I don't mean, it's not like now when you type in Earth from space and you see a lot of computer composite drawings of the Earth from space. It was literally just the same picture, just rows and rows. I was staring at this going, this is ridiculous. I said, NASA, you suck. How in the world is you guys have a terrible internet presence? So I just threw it away. I couldn't see the forest for the trees. And then when I finally, and I was vindicated on that, because when the first iPhone was built, and that story where the guy was, the first iPhone, big shocker, what they want to use for their background, but a picture of the globe, but there wasn't any. So they hired a NASA guy, and basically a NASA guy with a Photoshop background, and he created the first iPhone globe picture, and he photoshopped the hell out of that thing, and it wasn't even that great. Rob Skiba and others pointed out different replication and cloning tool stuff. He got lazy, and he admitted in an interview, which we've seen passed around all over the place, an audio interview, he's going, yeah, I photoshopped it, but I had to, because there was no images for him to base it off of. How is that even possible? And that carried literally all the way until 2015.
I'm just get more reaction. What do you make of that, Paula? What's your reaction to that? No pictures.
She's blown away.
Like, if you're saying that no one's been to space,
yes.
How do you know the Earth looks like the map behind you?
Ah, excellent point. We don't. Exactly. But in fact, what I try to tell people now is I only go with this map behind me because the authority, the powers that be that are out there, seem to be drawn to this map for whatever reason. And by that, I mean more specifically the UN flag, which was basically this map. That is the big reason. Plus, it fits in with a lot of what we're doing now. There are some problems with it. Not huge problems, in my opinion, but there are a few problems with it. But what I do know for absolute fact, and this is what I love about the whole flat Earth community, is not a lot of people, there are different camps about how this thing works, and the exact maps, and there's people trying to redraw maps all over the place. But what everybody agrees on is that it's not a globe. Whatever it is, they absolutely don't want us to see it. Whatever exact shape. Now, I still think the UN flag it's got to be somewhat close to it, but who knows? I mean, someone in the community, and if somebody in the community comes up with a different version of this, fine. I'm not going to lose a wink of sleep over it. But what everybody agrees on, which is again why the community is so, despite our differences and despite the squabbles here and there, it's still, once you go down the flat, and I got to mention the retention rate before we wrap up eventually, which is anybody that goes down this road. This is the other part that just floors me about flat Earth, is that 99.99% of anyone that goes down the flat Earth path, if you go down it and actually buy into it for even a little while, that's it. Nobody goes back to the globe. which also means that even they saying, yeah, it's not a globe. Yeah, I may not agree with everything that's going on in that map behind, but I know it's not a globe because everything that NASA and the space or agencies and all the governments at the highest levels, they're going way above and beyond to hide something. I mean, he doth protest too much. With there's no moon movies or no very almost the maps are all screwed. Even I'll throw one more out at you. Just this one you can look up at any time. Look up the Mercator map, which is the map that gets pulled down in the classroom. Everybody knows what it is. Even that map is wrong. Science will come straight out and tell you. They'll say, look, that map is dead wrong. The perspectives are all screwed up. It is meant to promote the northern hemisphere countries rather than the southern hemisphere countries and the shipping lanes and all this other stuff. The perspectives are way off, way off. The Gall-Peters map should be introduced into every education system in the world. And they won't even do that. And that's still a globe map. And they won't introduce that because they think it's going to create too much of a shock to the system, which is weird. You'd think someone would put that in, and even mainstream media has kind of touched on that a little bit. We won't even do that. So, doing this, it's going to be some tough sledding, but I do believe that, we're creeping in behind the edges because, or we're going around the flanks because again, nobody goes down the flat path and turns away from it. Find me somebody. Anyway,
well, I'm going to put a question to my wife and say, well, Paula, what exactly is the reason you currently think you live on a spinning ball flying through space?
Well, it's what we've always learned, and it's what's everywhere.
Yep.
So,
I agree. And again, I'm not going to look, you could come back at me right now and say, oh, you're full of it and I don't like you. And plus you're American and you guys are dorks anyway. I wouldn't even be offended. I wouldn't be offended by nothing you would say. And I can't, I've done interviews now where people will come at me, really viciously. And it's because, look, I've been where you and everyone else is. Look, I did not wake up and thought that flat Earth is the greatest idea ever. Took me 9 months to hammer this thing. And finally I gave up and said, that's it. I've got to put it out there. And even when I put it out there, I thought that somebody would come back. Here's where it got weird. I put it out there and said, put the challenge out to the scientific community and said, okay, shoot me down. Somebody figure out where I went wrong. And not only did nobody did, but then I started getting the subject matter experts that started, coming forward. People were unsolicited, people calling me, from branches of the military, surveyors, engineers, air traffic people, commercial, pilots. Everyone's, going along the same. And not only and I've done 20 of those guys now. Not only, and some of them, weren't anonymous. They went on air and, full name and were happy to do it. Not only did none of them recant, didn't take back their testimony, but nobody came out against them, which I thought was interesting, especially with the military guys. You would have thought that somebody from the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, somebody would have come out and said, well, I think that Air Force pilot's, absolutely wrong. Here's why. What do they got to lose?
Maybe that's something we could round out on, because I think it's Sean McCurrick. Is that how you say his
Sean
name?
McCrary.
That's the one. His proof, because in the clues, you didn't really touch on the water is flat and always has to be contained. 8 inches per mile squared isn't.
Yeah, no, I didn't touch on that at all.
But with him, the way he explained his proof,
yeah,
and obviously via you as a conduit, was just exceptional. Or I thought so. If you could maybe explain to Paula what he explained to you, that'd be wonderful.
Okay. What he was saying, and there was something I didn't touch in the clues, which was, look, the big thing where people will come back and say, well, there's a curve, and some people say they've seen it. Or they say, well, a ship goes off into the water and we can't see it anymore. Therefore it went off, went on the other side of the curve. Obviously we don't see it. Well, there's a problem with that. And that is, especially nowadays, we've got cameras with extremely high resolution zoom lenses on it. And so what happens is the ship goes off in the distance, and you see it, and fine, you get a pair of binoculars and it's gone, right? Ship's gone. Well, you take a high-end camera, not necessarily the phones. I mean, some phones have it, and you can zoom in on these things. I'll tell you the Sean part in a second. And all of a sudden, the ship's there. again. And you're going, that's not, I mean, you don't think much of it. You don't, wow, it's a really powerful zoom, but it doesn't occur to you that you're looking at something that you shouldn't be able to look at because it's on the other side of a hill. Because the curvature of the Earth, the Earth, if the Earth is a globe, then it's a hill you're looking over. And Sean McCrary came on, and he was a Navy missile commander, and he's going, look, we're hitting targets he was giving me the unclassified version. We're hitting targets at 60 plus. I'm using miles instead of kilometers, but I'll say kilometers to you for the heck of it. Let's say 80 kilometers away.
No, we're miles here. It's the Europeans,
Oh, okay.
the other Europeans, the crazy Europeans, the English
Oh, okay,
people.
good.
We like miles here.
Oh, seriously, you guys, wait, I thought London was metric system.
Liters for our fuel, miles is what we actually use on the road. So miles per gallon,
inches.
We actually fill up in liters, which is nuts. Metric system is the devil.
I agree. So, I mean, it's efficient, but for whatever reason, Americans, I was in grade school when that thing was introduced. We didn't, it's like, no, we're not passing this on to anybody. But anyway, he said, look, we're hitting targets at, let's say 60 miles away, 50 nautical miles.
He would disclose.
Huh?
He said 60, but you pressed him, but I think it was much further.
I think it's further too. I think it's further too, because you can only give the unclassified version. So we'll say 60 just for the heck of it. He goes, but here's the thing: when we're doing this target, we actually have to paint it with a laser. So the missile we fired up
in the background, I'm explaining to Paula exactly that. So he's got line of sight. So your explanation with the camera, you zoom in on the boat and go, wow, I've got a great zoom, but it doesn't occur to you there's no curve. Yeah. Well, he's doing it at 60 miles.
Yeah, with a beam radar. So he's taking.
So Paula's just asked, so can you not see a curve?
No, that's the weird thing. I'll do two quick things for you.
So that's the next question. This is the most pertinent question she's asked. So are you supposed to see a curve?
Yes, you are. Now, Neil deGrasse Tyson will say that you can't see a curve. And I agree. From side to side, if you're looking out at the beach, from side to side, horizontally, you shouldn't be able to see the curve. You're too small. The world is too big. I agree with Neil deGrasse Tyson on that. Even though there are some people who say, I saw the curve at the beach, or I saw a curve in an airplane, or I went up on top of a mountain and saw a curve. No, you want to see the curve, but no one's ever seen it. I put the challenge out to anybody, and I've still got no emails yet. I said, look, you think you see a curve, take a picture of it with your phone, put it on your laptop or wherever, put a ruler or a straight edge up to it, tell me if the curve's there. If the curve's still there, you send me a picture of it. I will put it on the air, and I will get away from flat Earth forever. It's been 20 months. No one's ever sent one to me. That's side to side. However, forwards and back, you should be able to see a curve. And by that, I mean there should be objects in the distance that once they're gone, they're gone. I'm meaning, so if there's a lighthouse that's 50 miles away and it's only 300 feet high, that lighthouse, you should not be able to see it. It should be 50 miles, a couple thousand feet. It should be on the other side of the hill of a curve. The curvature, again, for this is, refresher for anyone out there listening, 8 inches per mile squared, which is 8 inches times every mile times itself. So 2 miles, it's 2 times 2, which is 4 times 8, which is 32 inches. 3 times 3 is.
So how did that maths come about?
Oh, that's not our math. That's mainstream math. That's how they define the globe. They say the globe is defined. So if the globe is 8,000 miles across, if you cut it in half, that's 4,000 miles. You just keep breaking it down, and eventually you get down to 8 inches per mile squared. So
that's what you're going to ask.
So remember, it gets better. It gets worse and worse.
One sec, Mark. Just ask your question again.
So how did they come up with that? Like, how did they decide?
Oh, you mean how did they came up with that one?
I think that's what she's asking. How did they come up with 8 inches per mile squared as the measurement? I think that's is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I have to look it up. I mean, it's tied to the globe formula. I mean, that goes way back to quite a while when they determined it was a sphere. They had to measure it, and once they measured it, they could break it down to a granular level.
I mean, I'm glad it's been asked, because this is so often the case, as we find as flat earthers. No offense to my wife.
Oh, sure.
Most people don't really understand how the heliocentric model works, what the history is.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's a gap in our knowledge too, but most of the time we're having to explain to people how the heliocentric model works because we've got a really good understanding of it.
Let's put it this way:
doesn't.
The curvature you have to explain in a way that's small enough that most people can get their heads around it, so to speak. So kind of like the speed of light. Like everybody knows the speed of light is 186,000 miles a second. And the only reason we say that is because the 1,000,000 miles an hour, it's so fast in a miles per hour that people just can't even get their heads around it. So if the world is 8,000 miles across, then it's 4,000 miles if you cut it in half. And to get from, one point up here down to here in that 4,000 mile section, if you break it down, it comes down to 8 inches. That's what they say. Again, which I like. It's not our numbers. That's mainstream science numbers. So however they came up with it, I don't care.
I mean, if I was to hazard a guess, I think they figured out where, in optical terms, we lost sight of the boats. And that's probably.
I mean, so for example, it doesn't seem like a lot. So like at 3 miles, it's only 9 times 8 inches, which is 6 feet, right? But if you go out to 100 miles, it's 100 times 100, which is 10,000 times 8, which is 80,000. Divide by 12, it's around 6,670 feet, roughly, right? That's a huge amount of curve in 100 miles. And you're going, well, what do we see at 100 miles? We can see islands, go island to island out in Hawaii at 100 miles. Those islands should not be seen. And mainstream science will come back, well, no, it's a mirage. It's an optical illusion. You can't see it. It's like, the hell you can't. Of course you can. And you could see it in any weather condition, any light condition, just about any distance. It's always the same sort of thing, and any type of object, lit or unlit. And people don't, they try to dismiss it, but it's always there. In fact, I put the challenge out to science and find me an object which we can't see. Here's the thing. If it's a curve, show me an object that's 100 miles or less anywhere across a body of water that you can't see. And I'm ripping that off from Rob Skiba, where he challenged some professor, ahead of time. He goes, look, that island out here, I think it was the coast of California. He goes, that island, according to your math, you shouldn't be able to see it. And the guy was like, yeah, you can. He goes, yeah, you can. Here's some pictures of it.
And this brings us back to, hitting targets, line of sight. They're doing it all day long, or they wouldn't be sinking ships.
Yeah. He goes, there's nothing, and every military guy I talked to said the same thing, whether they're firing cannons or torpedoes or missiles or even sniper rifles, despite what you may hear, which is that not only are they not accounting for any curvature, but they're not accounting for any spin of the earth. Nothing's moving, and it's flat. And everybody I've talked to, every single subject matter expert has said the same thing. All the instruments, all the tech that we are using, that they use in their 9-to-5 jobs, say it's flat. But nobody believes it's flat because we're all told since we're 6 years old that it's not flat, that it's a globe. Every pilot says the same thing. It's like, they'll tell you from the cockpit, it looks absolutely flat when they get up there. Once you get up high enough, when you get past the bumps and little things, it looks perfectly flat, but it can't be flat because we know it's a globe, right? And that's where the disconnect happens. And it's like, well, yeah, of course we know it's a globe, right? Unless it's not a globe. Yeah, but how's that possible? And then you start thinking about it, it's like, holy crap. It's the if it is if it is true, and I firmly believe it is, it's the greatest con of all time. It is the P.T. Barnum line, which is never used. He said, you can fool some of the people all the time, but the second part is that you can fool all of the people some of the time. And I think that's what he meant here, which was that you can, in this case, if you have enough money and enough time, you can hide it, especially if you have the motivation to do it. And that's where, that's what I've been trying to put into people's heads. It's not, again, I'm not trying to convince you it's a globe. I'm sorry, that it's that it's flat. I'm just trying to put the idea in your head that maybe you'll look into it. But at the same time,
maybe that's where we should round it. Then I'll put one final question to Paula. Okay. Paula, do you think you've been duped? Do you think you've been fooled? Or I'll rephrase that. Do you think there's a possibility you've been fooled into thinking the world's a globe?
There's always the possibility.
So there you go.
Better answer than I expected.
I will do a disclaimer. Normally I do this disclaimer for someone that's not around a flat earther, but I'm going to do the disclaimer to her, which is, look, you seem like a very nice person, but I'm doing an Eric Dubé because he'll just torture me for the whole butt thing. But if you want your life, if you think, again, steal from the Men in Black thing, if you think you got a good beat on things and life is pretty good, and when you wake up in the morning, you think you got a pretty good, frame of reference, then don't look into this. Don't do it, because it is a Pandora's box. The only defense against this thing, and this is a warning to anybody who's trying to debunk it, because it's more of a challenge, ain't it, really, is to not look in the box. You want to make fun of the box, you want to kind of walk around the box and kind of glance at it, that's fine. Don't look in it. If you look in it and you look at it for more than a minute, you're gonna, all of a sudden I'll get an email from you saying, I haven't slept in 2 weeks. How do I turn it off? You can't turn it off. You're just gonna have to go with it.
Taking the red pill, you can't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the cipher line. Honestly, the cipher line, it really, really rings true more than anything. Where he goes, what?
Why didn't I take them?
Why? Or the second line where he was talking to Smith, and he goes, I want to be put back in, right? He goes, I don't want to remember anything. You hear me? Nothing. He was really adamant about that. Not just being put in the Matrix.
Nothing. I don't want to know anything about this flat Earth. Just remove
exactly. That's what it comes down to. Because once again, the retention rate. I have never seen an idea. People look at all sorts of other conspiracies and walk away because you can ignore them. You don't want to look at other conspiracies. Fine. Some are buried in the desert. You're never going to see them. But with this, you can't. Love it or hate it. You can't exactly ignore it. And so, there's some mornings I wake up, it's like, oh yeah, I do the same thing. It's like, why? But at the same time, I don't think I chose it. It chose me.
For sure. No, none of us intended to find this information out.
Exactly. There's got to be a reason for it. So I'm just waiting for the next one and preaching until that day comes.
So will normal service, flat Earth and other hot potatoes resume next Wednesday, I assume? Usual time,
Yeah, it was probably from what I understand, yes, we will be doing another Flat Earth and Hot Potatoes, and then I'm doing a Strange World, and I don't know if I'm doing an email show, but I'm doing an interview. I'll do it. Hopefully it'll go well. I'm kind of curious. I'm doing an interview with the actual Ghostbusters guys. I'm sorry, not Ghostbusters, Ghost Hunters tonight.
Oh, cool.
That long running television show. And they really haven't given me a lot of back and forth correspondence yet. So I'm wondering, what they'll do. But at the same time, I'm really curious to see how they'll react. Because look, these are guys that have basically looked for ghosts in haunted houses for the last 10 years, and I'm sure they fully believe in ghosts, which means you believe either in a soul, the actual existence of a soul, or you believe in interdimensional beings. The point is, how are they going to react to flat Earth? Are they gonna shoot it down, or are they going to be open-minded about it? And if they're not, I'm going to call them on it and say, "Wait, really?" That goes along with my very first line. We'll circle back to this final thing, which was from the Clue, which is why the very first line of my Clue, which I said, "Look, there are people that believe in every other conspiracy there is, including that Parliament is made up of lizard people." And yet those people, if I say flat Earth, they'll say, get out of here. They'll just wave me off and leave the room.
Yeah, you stole my joke. I was going to say, the ghost people, yeah, they sound like they're really open-minded. Mention flat Earth to them. They'll tell you
that's what they called me. So I'm wondering if they're going to be like, do the whole stunned amazement thing, or if they're going to actually try to challenge it. And I'm going, do you have a leg to stand on here? You've been walking around in haunted houses finding nothing for 10 years. Nobody's found a single ghost walking around haunted houses. Really? You're going to challenge flat Earth? Anyway, so thank you, by the way. Thank you, Paula, for being open-minded enough to at least sit down and allow me to rant and stuff.
Thanks for chatting.
Yeah, she's a woman of few words, Mark. With that,
no, it's okay.
Also, thank you, Mark, for being on Flat Earth and Other Hot Sausages. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cool.
And I'll also say a massive thank you to our audience for joining us live. Thank you, Paula, also. I've been Nathan Oakley. I'll see you all in the next video.